Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda, and I'm so glad that you could join me today. So, we've talked about a lot of different religions. We've talked about how growing up, I was part of a Christian denomination known as the United Church of Christ. I was in that denomination for right around 40 years. And I always had different pulls that something didn't sit right with me. So, as I was having these pulls and as I was learning more, I discovered about other religions. So, why didn't I choose Islam? Why didn't I stay in Christianity? Those are big questions. So today, I'm going to take small steps and tell you a little bit about some of the reasons I, in my research, decided against Islam for me. Today, we're going to talk about Muhammad, but we're also going to talk about different aspects of why I chose not to do Islam. We're going to talk about 4 different aspects. We're going to talk about Muhammad. We're going to talk about the way that people were treated. We're going to talk about the Quran. And then we're also going to talk about the view of God within Islam. So those 4 aspects, we're going to talk about all of them as we discuss why Islam was not for me. So if you're interested in learning more about Islam or more about the problems that I had with Islam as I was learning, please stay tuned. We'll begin right after the intro. So within Islam, Muhammad is a huge deal. Let's just be honest. Muhammad is viewed to be the last great prophet. He essentially was the continuation of Jesus. And it is his word that essentially has created Islam as they know it. I, in my research, have some problems with Muhammad. I do. I don't fault anybody who is in Islam and that's what they believe, that you're entitled to your beliefs, and that's absolutely fine. But in this presentation, I'm purely looking from myself and different aspects that didn't fit or didn't work for me. Okay. So first thing I struggled with was Muhammad is notoriously known as being illiterate. He could not read, he could not write. But they say the Quran was given to Muhammad and Muhammad gave it to the people. How can you have someone who is illiterate, they can't read or write, but they're creating a book for everybody to follow? I don't know how to make that make sense. Now, there are stories in the Quran that kind of contradict that thought. There are some that say, oh no, he was illiterate and it was very common for people to be illiterate at that time. So this was just commonplace. And because he was illiterate, that's why God or Allah chose him to deliver this great book to the people. Okay. But there are also stories in the Quran that indicate that he wasn't illiterate. It would be too happenstance, too coincidental to be true. And when you're looking at something with a questioning eye and you see things that don't match up, it's hard to explain them away. So let's explore them together. And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. I want to learn. So when he was talking about the Treaty of Hudabai, it was actually written or recorded by his cousin, Ali. They were routinely one of his personal scribes. Okay, so there was a notation that within the treaty, a man from the Quraysh, which is kind of like an overseer of people who were looking at the Quran and like religious leaders, they rejected the idea that the prophet was having somebody else sign his name. So because he was illiterate, he said, well, you can't sign your own name. You can't have somebody else sign in your behalf. That wouldn't be right for this treaty. Okay, so they suggested that they change it and that his cousin then say, the messenger of Allah. The cousin didn't like that. And the cousin said, no, I'm never going to admit, they're never going to omit the messenger of Allah within the document whenever I'm writing your name. I'm always going to put that in there. Okay. Reminds me of other people standing up for, no, I'm not going to take something out just because you don't like it. Okay. So they do this, and then after Ali says, I'm not going to do this, Muhammad essentially says, okay, fine, show me when you're done. Show me. Okay, if the man is illiterate and he can't read and he can't write, what is he looking for? What is he looking for? That doesn't make sense to me. And then to continue on the story, it is said that the Prophet Muhammad takes his thumb and hides a word or two. Because that was his sign that he wanted certain words to be excluded or remove them. Again, if he can't read or write, how would he know what word to exclude? How would he not know that the word that he put his thumb on might be the most important word in that sentence, and without that word, the whole document doesn't make sense? You see what I mean? I get that some people cannot read or write. But if you can't read or write, then you would typically have that throughout your everyday existence, not just in select situations where it's supposed to benefit you. So that was concerning. The second one that actually concerned me greatly was part of when he was gifted the Quran. So it was said that he was in this cave and he was praying and he was meditating and he started shaking and convulsing, and that it came upon him and he didn't know what was happening. And then he's going to wrestle with this guardian who like presses him and says, you need to read this. And he said, I can't, I'm illiterate. No, you need to read this. I can't, I'm illiterate. And he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know if he was possessed by a demon. Okay. If you don't know what's going on and you don't know who's telling you to do things, whether they're good or bad, you were by yourself. Nobody else was there to kind of help understand what was going on. How do I not know that he had medical issues? Maybe he was hallucinating. Maybe he had a medical issue where he started to convulse. He had a seizure. Maybe he was eating something that was not good and he had a foodborne illness. It doesn't make sense. The explanation that he gives just seems like kind of crazy dreams. Maybe a bad drug trip. I don't know. His story just doesn't add up to me. And to add to it, like, he had more stories that he shared. At one point he shared when he was a child, he was being cared for by these Bedouin women. And during the time he was being cared for, these two men in white remnant or white robes or garments, in the translation of Muhammad's biography, these two men came to me with a golden basin full of snow. They took me, split my body open, and then they took my heart and split it open, took out a black clot, which they flung away. Then they washed my heart, my body with the snow until they made them pure. Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. First of all, not many children remember things when they're young. Second of all, how, medically speaking, how can you cut someone open, cut their heart open, and then rub snow on them, and then they're made pure? And their sentence of, and then they washed my heart and my body with the snow until they made them pure. So the snow washing made the people who cut you open pure? That whole story just sounds made up. Medically speaking, that doesn't happen. You cannot cut somebody's heart in half and rub it with snow and make it all better. It doesn't work like that. So, big questions about Muhammad. I mean, this happens repeatedly that he has these visions. It's been said that he'll go into trance-like states for weeks, months, hours, even up to years. And he won't know what's going on. That doesn't sound like somebody I want to follow. That sounds like somebody who needs medical help to me. It sounds like he needs medical help. So maybe instead of just saying, oh yeah, that Muhammad, he's just so wise, maybe we should be getting him some help. Just saying. Another thing that I have big problems with is, we'll start with the marriages. So in Islam, the Quran says you should marry women in 2s, 3s, or 4s. But if you can't do justice to all 4, you should only marry 1. Okay. I love with my whole heart. I don't like the idea of sharing my love with anybody. I struggle with that jealousy piece. That's why polygamy would never work with me. I also struggle with the idea that in society, if the man wants a wife, he just goes and gets another wife. And the wife has no say about it at all. She's supposed to sit down and shut up and just deal with it. That doesn't sit well with me. It does not sit well with me at all. Now, add to that the part that if you have women and you marry them in 2s, 3s, or 4s, you're supposed to provide for them all equally. You're supposed to provide like their housing, their food, their clothing, everything. The woman is responsible for nothing financially. The man is responsible for everything. And he's supposed to do so completely and equally for all of his wives. Okay? If the woman chooses to work outside the home, which is not encouraged, if they choose to work outside the home, they are supposed to retain all of their own money. And if they choose to get a divorce, it is supposed to be split 50-50. However, we also know that in societies where Muslim populations are high, tends to be more Aramaic areas, women do not have the same treatment as men. They are not allowed the same things as men. So the idea that you can have 4 wives without any of them consenting to additional wives, and they can be treated completely differently, and you have no say about that, I struggle with. Now let's add to the fact that at the time of his death, Muhammad had 9 wives. So what I hear from that is he's one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of people. Okay. Back it up. At some times in his life, he was reportedly having as many as 12 wives. 12. Now, there are some that say he had these extra wives. He didn't really have relations with them, but he took care of them. They were widows, and it was a source of protection for them. Okay. But again, that's not what the Quran says. If you are the leader of Islam and Islam follows the Quran because the Quran is the book of God, why don't the rules apply to you? I don't understand. Please help me understand. Then I heard the story about Muhammad had at one point adopted a son named Zaid. Okay? Zaid got married and Zaid died. So to protect his daughter-in-law, out of the goodness of his heart, Muhammad married his daughter-in-law. That doesn't seem like love to me. That seems like coercion. And when you pair in that Zaid died in battle, that he was encouraged to go into by his father. 2 + 2 makes 4. That's not okay in my book. There's just so many instances where Muhammad will say something and he will do something drastically different. But the kicker for me, the reason that I just can't with Muhammad, is one of these many wives he took when she was just 6 years old. Now, I know some people will say, oh, but you don't understand arranged marriages. It happens all the time. The kids are married as children and that it's just commonplace. She was 6. I used to be a teacher. I can't imagine a 6-year-old getting married. I can't imagine parents of a 6-year-old allowing them to get married. Now add to that the kicker, which is just disgusting to me, and I can't. Muhammad consummated this marriage, not when she was 6 because she was too young, but when she was 9, for crying out loud. 9. That is disgusting. That is mind-boggling. You can't explain that away. You can't say, oh no, he only did it because he was in a trance-like state and she was just coming on to him. A 9-year-old wouldn't do that. No, make it make sense, because that doesn't. And there are some that say, and I have this quoted because it just appalled me. It says, the age was not an issue because people of the tropics that were in that area matured earlier. Girls of Arabia matured at a very early age. So 9 wasn't too early to consummate a marriage. Excuse me? No. That's not okay. That's not okay. So from the beginning to the end, there's just so many things about Muhammad that don't sit right with me. I am a privileged individual who has been born in the United States of America, where women are given a voice, women are given rights, women are given opportunities that not everyone in the world has. And I honor that and I acknowledge that. But you can't make that make sense to me. This man has these trance-like states. This man does these things that don't make sense. You can't tell me how consummating a marriage with a 9-year-old brings you closer to God. How is that supposed to make you or her a better person? How? Why are you saying all these rules and you don't have to follow them? Just everybody else does. It doesn't make sense. And that's just the beginning of what doesn't make sense for me in Islam. It just doesn't make sense. So, there you have it. My problems with Muhammad. Big, bold, and in your face. Definitely. That was part 1. Our second part we're going to talk about is the general treatment of people in Islam. We're going to talk about that in part number 2. As for reasons Islam just doesn't work for me. So, if you enjoyed today's presentation, if you learned something, I invite you to hit that subscribe button so you can learn more about my journey and the channel and all the other questions that we have to answer. And I certainly hope that you hit this button for liking it as well, so I know that you're watching and you enjoy my feedback. I appreciate that. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for joining me on this crazy journey. Thank you for listening to me vent. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, remember, the more you know, the more you grow. Take care. Bye.